A Senate committee passed a media shield law this week that essentially allows the government to determine who is a real journalist for the purposes of protection. Based on the bill, a real journalist is someone who works or worked for an entity or service that shares news or information by means of a newspaper, wire service, a news agency, or via a magazine or through television or radio broadcast. These people would have to have the primary intent to investigate events and procure material in order to share that information with the public. Opinion journalists might not be covered. Senator Feinstein worried the shield law would provide special privileges to those who are not reporters at all, saying those who don't receive a salary couldn't be considered real reporters. Now the shield law is very careful to distinguish real journalists from those who shouldn't be protected. This means bloggers and citizen journalists, unless they can prove to the government that at the inception of their information gathering process, their sole intent was to inform the public. The bill explicitly excludes protection for those whose principal function is to publish primary source documents that haven't been authorized. This means no WikiLeaks cables, no NSA leaks, just a rampant, unchecked government. This is in direct violation of the Constitution, which prohibits the making of any law abridging the freedom of speech or infringing on the freedom of the press. Doesn't the shield law actually abridge the freedom of speech of citizen journalists by intimidating them with the threat of prosecution? And the shield law also says they're going to protect real journalists from having to reveal their sources. So I guess the Fifth Amendment is only there to protect IRS officials who have committed criminal acts and perjury. What is actually happening here is the government is trying to take a fundamental right and turn it into a government-granted privilege. A privilege that can be revoked by them for any reason that they deem necessary in the future. They created the shield law to protect journalists, but only the journalists that they decide are worthy of protection. The shield law actually bypasses the First and Fifth Amendment by giving a virtual driver's license to those the government deems worthy of free speech. Basically, this shield law only protects the corporate media and not citizen journalists who aren't willing to regurgitate the same government-vetted stories. It's not protection at all, but prior constraint. And even if you are a real journalist, like Michael Hastings, if you get a little too controversial, you'll be investigated by the FBI. So why is the Obama administration so vigorously attacking the alternative press? It's because the mainstream media is dead. The authentic media is winning the war for the minds of the people. That's why the Obama administration is protecting its lapdog journalists while instilling fear in those that might dare ask questions. Obama's hired even more journalists to be a part of his team. Up to 19 journalists from influential outlets like ABC, CNN, The Washington Times, and LA Times are going to work for the very administration they should be holding accountable. So don't expect any of those journalists to report on their boss's debacles like Obamacare or the illegal NSA spying and wiretapping or Benghazi. Maybe Obama needed more journalists on his Transforming America team for the big rollout of government-funded news after the recent repeal of the domestic propaganda ban. Those journalists can now use their talent to influence public opinion, shaping a favorable narrative for war or for giving up your rights in favor of safety. And that is what this attack on the press all boils down to. They're trying to convince us that our fundamental right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press should be a government-granted privilege that they'll reserve only for their loyal lapdogs. Reporting for the InfoWars Nightly News, I'm Leanne McAdoo.